This is Future Men Audio, where we talk about supporting a better future for every boy, every man, and everyone. Part 4. Young men and men at risk of not being in education, training, or employment. Welcome to the final post in this series on masculinity. So far, we have been looking at the thoughts and attitudes of groups of boys, young men, and men that work with Future Men, a London-based charity that supports this group with a particular focus on transitional moments in their lives. In this last section, we will be reflecting on the views shared by a group of young men and men aged 16 to 22 who are at risk of not being in education, training, or employment. How was this group structured? 4 people from this group came together to repeat the task mentioned in previous posts. Each person was given a collection of sentences broadly associated with masculinity. They had to consider each in turn and then place them under a heading from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Each had to provide a rationale as to why they had chosen to put the sentence there, and then others were invited to comment. But before we start, 2 of the participants were slightly late, giving me the opportunity to ask one person their thoughts on masculinity. It was then clarified how he defined the term, to which he replied it was the way a person thinks and behaves. The group was then asked which sex it represented. After clarifying that I meant male or female, he replied, could be either. This took the facilitator aback, so they asked the person to clarify, to which he said, girls can be masculine too. It's not just boys or men. This was an interesting start. The others joined and the session got underway. The conversation began on the topic of partnerships, and the first card discussed was men should do the same amount of housework as women. This became a lesson in interpretation, as it had been put under strongly disagree. I took that to mean that women should do more housework. However, the person who put it there corrected me, saying whoever has more time should do the most housework. If it's the same, then it's the same. If it's different, then it's different. The group also agreed with the placement of men need to earn more than their partners, saying that it would be okay if their partners earned more than them. One person said, it's more about the respect in a relationship. If my girlfriend earned more than me, I'd be okay with that unless she made me feel bad about it. The facilitator wanted to get a sense of how their friends would treat them if their partners earned more than them, to which the same person said, I think some of them wouldn't care at all, but some might make fun of me at times. Personally, I wouldn't care unless I was made to feel bad by my girl. A further scenario was put to them, asking them to imagine themselves in their 50s, having spent the majority of their time in the relationship as a person who earned less and did more of the housework. If I had been able to achieve my goals and we had goals together that we achieved, then it would be all okay, one person said. It would only be where the relationship wasn't equal that I would feel bad in myself and I might feel less of a man. The facilitator then asked why the statement, men need to provide more for their family, had been placed under strongly agree after so much agreement about equality of partnerships. The person who placed the card had done so to reflect that men need to provide for their family, as do women. It wasn't that one had to provide and the other didn't. One person said, if the man did not provide, then it might deprive him of his masculinity, but only because he wasn't contributing, not because he has to provide more. The group was proving to be highly nuanced early on. The focus then moved to matters of emotions and mental health. One participant said, if people don't cry and show their emotion, it will come out later in another way. And that was the response to, it's okay for men to cry. The group was asked how they would feel emotionally if they saw a man or woman in their late 20s or early 30s crying on the street. I set a particular local street to add context. The group stayed silent for a moment, so the question was furthered by asking who they would be more inclined to approach. One person said immediately, the man. If I saw a man crying, not that women cry for no reason, but for a man to be crying in the street, you know something bad has happened. He was asked what would he do. Just go up and ask what happened and if I could help. I think another man would like that because I would have a similar point of view, he said. Some statistics about outcomes for men were shared with the group, stating that 87% of homeless people are men, 95% of the prison population is male, 75% of those who take their own lives are men, and that men are twice as likely to be alcohol dependent as women. See, that's what I mean, one said. If you don't express your emotions, these things happen. The facilitator sought to clarify why they had put people would take advantage of me if they thought I was sensitive under agree after the previous part of the conversation. The response was they interpreted being sensitive as being different from showing emotions by saying that it was more general as opposed to emotions which, for them, are rooted in an event or series of events. Being sensitive, therefore, was something that others could pick up on and exploit. The group had been so vocal, and we were nearing the time allocated, and the facilitator had 2 more things they wanted to put to them. The group was asked to imagine themselves as a 60-year-old, i.e. a person born in the 1950s, white men from Liverpool, and to rearrange the cards in that character. Why Liverpool? One asked, after gauging how much contact they had outside London and agreeing that London was not representative of the entire country. We got to a point of agreeing that not London was the larger dynamic to consider. The group moved the cards to reflect how that scenario would change their view of the exercise. The facilitator was clear that they didn't really want to refer to each statement, but asked them to reflect on how that scenario would change their responses. The group collectively agreed that it was likely a lot had changed since the 1960s, and they felt their answers may have been more stereotypical of how a man is understood. The picture of the cards had changed such that showing emotions was generally seen to be weak. Men and women were more divided in their roles in rearing families, and men were physically tough. Finally, the participants broadly defined themselves as Black British with parental heritage in the West Indies, and so the group was asked to restructure the cards to show how they would have answered had they been answering these questions in their home countries. Again, the facilitator did not go into each statement as we did not have the time. However, certain themes were more consistent with their idea of how the person not from London in the 1960s may have answered the questions. Physical prowess was seen as holding more value for masculinity, as was reduced showing of emotions. There was variance, however, in terms of household management. One person said, "As a boy, I would be expected to do a lot more chores and would have just continued doing that." Now, at the conclusion of the focus group, I thanked them for their time and restated the next steps. The group was asked how they found the process and the discussion. The group agreed that they had enjoyed it. They said, "More things like this and future men need to be done." When you broke it down with the stats like that, I was shocked. Well, not shocked, because when you think about it, it feels true, but when you said it like that, powerful. And that's it. Masculinity. It is a topic steeped in academic discourse, bringing together many threads from society, be they finance, employment, power, politics, or division of labour. I really hope you enjoyed these posts. Future Men would like to thank all the participants in the focus groups for sharing their time, thoughts, and energy. And to end, here's a few questions for all of you listening to this series. What is something you've learned? What have you taken away from the series? And what is something that you felt? Thank you for listening to Future Men Audio. To find out more, go to www.futuremen.org. That's www.futuremen.org. Or connect with us on Twitter at FutureMenUK or LinkedIn under Future Men.